continuing to target down on Phoenix1 in the jungle area. We already mentioned that Mike Young hasn't had the same kind of carry performances that we've expected out of him. A lot of that could be attributed to the fact that now there's a ton of tanks in the jungle, and his Nidalee and his Lee Sin and those carry champions aren't nearly as effective.
For sure, and we are on 7:15, like you said, so as you can tell, GCU throwing a lot of 80 carry bans at Arrow there, looking pretty upset about it, shaking his head.
He did not want to see all those Kalista and Caitlyn bans being thrown at him.
No, not at all. Phoenix1 responding with a lot of tank-focused bans. GCU are a team that generally plays a little bit slower. This is something that was their story in Spring Split of the NACS as well, but Phoenix was more lane dominant, and they would try and get those leads and spread them out. Now they play a lot better as a team in the early game, but it is still very vision focused in the sense that they like to work together and get vision, then rotate everyone down for a dive. And they do play very textbook in a sense.
Yeah, and we see the first pick overall in this draft is going to be Thresh, so the playmaking support still have priority here, specifically for Phoenix1. It's one of Xpecial's most played support champions. It's something you definitely don't want falling into the hands of Mad Live, although it does give away a couple of powerful pickups for GCU.
Yeah, Tristana is kind of what is considered for a lot of people to kind of be the third in that tier list of 80 carries, with Kalista and Caitlyn being at the top, but Tristana has a decent early laning phase, gets into that hyper late game scaling champion with the resets and all of that, and there's other things that can match her late game, but not many who can match her early game push potential, which is why you tend to see her a little bit higher prioritized. Also the Jarvan, just a great champion, flex between top and jungle right now, has really strong early ganks as well as skirmishing on the top side if you take him up there. Just a really generally strong champion, but we got it already.
Yeah. They're just going to lock in the Nidalee right away for Mike Young, so maybe putting his carry pants on himself. That may wind up putting Zig on tank duty in the top lane, but we'll have to see. Still a lot of draft ahead of us, and well, as I mentioned that, it looks like they're going to pick Zig's champion right away, and they go for the Renekton on the top side, so not the tankiest of champions, but P1 kind of returning to more of the aggressive playstyle they've been known for.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really think of a more aggressive start to your draft than Thresh, Nidalee, Renekton, all early game playmaking champions, and that was kind of their identity when they were kind of having that small resurgence in the middle of the split, was they would just skirmish people so aggressively and so hard early on that they would scrap out these advantages, the game would get very bloody, and it's no longer this slow and controlled game that a lot of teams like to play, a team like GCU. So if Phoenix1 can execute on this playstyle that they were doing so well before all the tanks became meta, they might be able to grab an advantage here versus GCU.
Looks like they may have to do it against some comfort pickup here from Goldcoin United as they do lock in the Gnar, solidifying Jarvan into the jungle for Santorin, but more importantly, giving Solo a champion that he's played one of his most played throughout the NACS entirely, and one of the champions that he's historically performed on and had some really good teleport play, teleporting into a team fight. You have the Narvin kind of combination. This is Goldcoin United, who fight around objectives, use that vision control, and look for those opportunities.
Yeah, and Solo has been one of the mainstays in the Challenger Series for a long while now. He's always seemingly in the finals, always pushing into almost winning a promotion tournament, but hasn't really gotten through and had his big break quite yet. And it would be very fitting if on the final promotion tournament ever, he's able to finally kind of solidify himself as a LCS starter and hopefully get a spot for himself.
It does look like that Goldcoin United during this second ban phase are continuing to just harp down on Arrow's champion pool, trying to punish P1 for not matching kind of the 80 carry pickup from Goldcoin United in the first pick phase. Then we wind up having a lot of playmaking potential taking away from Goldcoin United side, though, as P1, they ban away the Taric, which Mad Life has been a big factor on, but also the Orianna, which is one of Fly's most played champions.
Yes, I am expecting P1 to maybe go for something like a Jhin here. Who knows? I mean, there are tanks on the enemy team, but they're mostly health stacking tanks. They don't necessarily build a lot of armor right away. Could see the Draven if we wanted to double down on that kind of aggressive playstyle. Arrow did play it a couple times in the closing weeks of the LCS, I believe, but looks like they're going to instead go for the boring old Varus.
Well, maybe not as aggressive as you would think the Draven to be, but Varus can wind up being a bully in lane, so we'll see how it stacks up against the Tristana. He does have Thresh to kind of save him. You know, one of the pitfalls of Varus is the fact he's not extremely mobile. Now you wind up putting the Thresh Lantern into the mix, and he's able to kind of get out of danger pretty much whenever he needs to. And of course, the Corki's going to be locked in last overall for P1. That's Ryu's most played champion by a long shot.
Yes, so overall, they do have a fair amount of playmaking here on Phoenix1 side, but it's mostly going to be kind of a picky siege comp focused team that's going to have a lot of early game advantages that they'll try and transition. GCU, much more team fight focused with the Jarvan-Gnar combination that you already said being a bit of a nuisance for teams. You see the Morgana counterpick, and then lastly the Cassiopeia coming in for Fly. Actually not too bad of a matchup into that Corki.
Yeah, so the Cassiopeia is going to wind up having a bit of lane presence early game, but of course will scale into a late game monster, as will the Tristana from Goldcoin United. So definitely kind of having a bit of investment in their later game carries, whereas on the flip side for P1, we already mentioned they want to go hard, they want to go fast, they want to be aggressive. And their playstyle is not necessarily as team fighty. They're really relying on, I guess, their bottom lane to kind of start fights off. You have the Thresh Hook and the Varus Chain of Corruption, and that's pretty much all of your CC.
Yeah, you want to see for Phoenix1, Mike Young get aggressively in Santorin's face, try and harass him off camps. Maybe if you're Thresh or Renekton get priority in their lanes, they can roam in and bring some of that CC that Nidalee is desperately lacking. And then you can start finding some kills, you get a gold lead, and then when you set up in front of a turret with Thresh, Nidalee, Corki, Varus, you have a lot of poke and a lot of ways to find either picks or just melt down turrets. So they're going to try and transition that early lead into pushing down around turrets. And on the side of GCU, like we said, huge team fight comp, going to be all about those engages.
And Goldcoin United, we'll see if their kind of slow and controlled vision dominant style is enough to quell the aggression that Phoenix1 looks to be going for right out of the gate here in game number 1 of this entire best of 5 series in our final promotion tournament for the NA LCS.
And even though both teams get to play at least 2 best of 5s, you want to make sure you start things out on the right foot, get a victory here today, and make your road much easier from there on.
Yeah, like they said at the analyst desk, all you have to do is win 2 matches and you're pretty safe. You lose 2 matches and you're out, so you don't want to start off the promotion tournament with a loss. Instead, you want to start off as aggressive or as controlled as you would like to be. P1 is the one that looks like they're going to be the aggressive comp. GCU, we'll see if they can kind of quell that aggression through their objective control, their vision control, and the stuff that has propelled them to a 3-1 victory over E United in the Challenger Finals.
What's going to be surprising, or well, what I'm going to keep my eye on, is how well GCU can kind of keep up with Mike Young, because the big thing with him, when you bring this insanely aggressive style, is if the other team's prepared for it or not. And you saw in North America, even after the first couple victories, people who have been scrimming against them or been watching their games closely understood that's how Mike Young wanted to play, and they already started kind of indexing towards that, whereas when he went to Europe, no one knew this guy, no one knows how he plays, unless you've done a ton of scouting on him or if you've played them in scrims at all, which I'm sure they hadn't. You're not ready for how in-your-face he can be. And that's kind of what we're going to see for GCU here is, are they actually prepared for Mike Young? Because he's basically set up to carry this game as we are known he can do when he's on the Nidalee pick. You might see a super leash into aggressive invades, and if GCU is not prepared for that because they haven't been in the NA LCS playing against P1 over the course of the season, they could be on the back foot.
And let's not forget that at this point in time, last split, Goldcoin United was in the promotion tournament and took Team Liquid and Envy 2-5 games, and a lot of that came off of the back of our big questions were, can Santorin, you know, he has the stigma of being a ward bot, can he control the likes of Rainover in the jungle from Team Liquid? They took them to 5 games. Lyra from Envy in the jungle took them to 5 games, and more importantly, was counter-jungling Lyra when we thought that that wasn't even going to be a thing that Santorin could do. So as you mentioned before, Mike Young might be that catalyst for P1, but it's up to Santorin to make sure that Nidalee does not run wild across the board.
It was a very interesting promotion tournament last time around just because we had Doublelift joining Team Liquid right before that and bringing a lot of spark to them, as well as the fact that Envy, despite being the 10th place team, actually had a fantastic match record, or game record, excuse me, in terms of what you expect out of a 10th place team. So they were no slouches compared to what we sometimes see of teams falling out of the LCS and into the relegation spot. Here, you know, P1 and Team Liquid both ending their season on kind of down notes with some losses. You heard that in the intro a little bit. Both teams were very disappointed by their position here.
Yeah, and to kind of parallel that, I mean, Team Liquid, they're in a very familiar spot as to last split. They came in as the 9th place team in the promotion tournament, are doing so again here. Phoenix1, they made it to playoff. They got championship points, which have now dissolved at this point because they're in the promotion tournament, but also, you see Ryu getting aggressed on here, that early Cassiopeia lane bully potential coming out from Fly. But P1 are in the same spot. Their game record overall, slightly better than Team Liquid's ending the split. So they did not necessarily think that they were going to be at this position whatsoever. But I mean, as you mentioned, they have parallels to Envy of Lassos. Mike Young getting a little aggressive with the Gromp, but he
knows what he's doing.
He's going to heal himself, dude. He'll be okay.
Gonna go for an early recall this time around instead of any of those aggressive paths. Does a 5 jungle camp clear to start out. Gonna reset, shop up, and then get back onto the map aggressively. And you see just how fast that Nidalee is, getting a 5 camps to just Jarvan's 4. He did do Krugs, which is a little bit slower of a camp. But overall, this is Nidalee's kind of style. You don't always need to be in their face. You can go for a little bit more focus on power farming.
And meanwhile, on the bottom side of the map, we've seen Xpecial and Arrow. Despite being very harped on in the champion select phase, Arrow on this Varus pickup has continued to kind of shove back Rikara and Madlife. We see already a huge CS advantage developing in P1's favor, 23 compared to 10 on this Varus versus Tristana.
It's a tough weekend for Rikara in terms of teams coming into the promotion tournament from the LCS. Piglet and Arrow, 2 phenomenal import AD carries who have had great seasons in the past. Obviously, their team struggled a lot more this previous season, but Rikara had a couple struggles in the finals of the NACS, and it's not going to get any easier here. They are in a bit of a tough matchup, but it's some of those invades we're talking about.
Yeah, we've seen Mike Young getting up close and personal with Santorin. Was wound up getting the pounce down on him and forces him away from the Grom. Already a slight level advantage, as you mentioned, getting 1 extra camp compared to Santorin before going back. Utilizing the Blast Cone as well, so there's no way for Santorin to feel safe in his own jungle. The Xpecial is going to wind up clearing out a little bit of vision using that Scryer's balloon that he popped on the bottom side of the map. We'll see now Santorin getting forced out of his own jungle. This bottom side of the map that P1 was being targeted by during Champion Select seems to not be the focus for them, because as we mentioned during Champion Select, Arrow and Xpecial are going to be the ones that are a catalyst for these pickoffs that P1 are going to be reliant on getting in these seed situations, whereas GCU are just trying to take them out of the equation as quickly as possible through Champion picks.
And it's also why it's so important to try and keep your pressure up in your lanes here. You see how long Xpecial is able to spend in that topside jungle, and Arrow is not losing CS during that time that Xpecial is roaming. So if GCU is not able to really match up to the push that's going to come in from the bot lane and potentially up in the top side as Renekton's able to find some good trades, it might be tough for Santorin to hang even, trying to get some counter jungling down on the other side of the map, but Mike Young is kind of in the area.
Yeah, he knows something's up because he threw that spear at his wolves and they were not there, but Santorin's one up hitting a blast cone for himself, did want to take in the Scuttle Crowd, so he got the speed shrine, but still Mike Young, ever so slightly ahead of the pace of his opposing jungler, level 5 compared to level 4, forces Santorin away from his counter.
Looking for some more opportunities. Serhas is down the bot side, just constantly shoving it in on the side of P1. Already a 15 CS advantage, and they do have Morgana into Thresh, which is a small bit of a counter pick. It does not necessarily beat the Thresh in lane, but neutralizes some of what he does well, which is those kind of insane hook into Lantern gank setups and flash plays and all that different stuff that you can do. So not as easy into a Morgana, but you still have to play the matchup very well, and it feels like P1's bot lane is outperforming GCU so far.
And the Morgana pickup here is kind of just to make sure that Rikara can stay safe throughout this lane phase, as you mentioned already, at a CS deficit, whereas the mid lane for the side of GCU seemed to be going slightly in favor of Fly, although he hasn't necessarily been able to exert the same amount of dominance that P1's bottom lane is going to be able to offer these trade situations. Only a couple of CS over Ryu, as both of them had gone back. There's a tier stacked up for Cassiopeia, but a Sheen already picked up for Ryu in the mid lane.
That is kind of the focal point for GCU. We were talking about how Fly does a good job moving around the map and helping his team out. Cassiopeia, not the best champion for that, has a hard time getting out of laning phase, especially when you compare it to Corki, who can get that package and start going for some big roams. P1 feeling the pressure right now, 600 gold down already from P1's early game comp.
And we see Rikara just continuously being bullied out of lane, but this is kind of like a two-pronged assault too, because not only are you just keeping Rikara down on a later game carry like the Tristana, taking away, you know, the quote, the highest KDA player on GCU, although he may not be the go-to carry for them. He does have very impressive statistics, as now they're continuing to use this aggression to invade and steal away a blue buff from the side of GCU. But you're also taking Madlife out of the equation. He's stuck in the lane. He has to sit there with Rikara, and he has to be able to kind of babysit the Tristana, and it's not letting him go partner up with Santorin to deal with the fact that Mike Young is invading his jungle, and to put that vision control down to contest Mike Young whenever he enters.
Yeah, something you heard from some other teams in the NACS when they asked about, you know, what scares you in GCU. A lot of people said Madlife, his roams. He shows up at crazy places, and if, like you said, he's stuck babysitting Rikara, just trying to help him get CS under a turret, it really does limit what he's able to do. But Fly trying to exert some pressure here in the mid lane.
Getting aggressive here. Ryu did want to get grounded from the Meows, so the paralyzing gaze is not going to wind up stunning Ryu, instead just Valkyries away from that, but aggressive trades coming up from the Cassiopeia in this mid lane.
He's going to have a corrupting pot ticking, as well as the slight sustain that comes in Cassiopeia's kit. Naturally able to heal back up to half health, as Ryu just kind of has to sit on that Doran Shields regen. Going to have a harder time in this laning phase after that nice trade out of Fly there. And hopefully that starts getting some control back around this mid lane, and you see Santorin's able to meet up with Fly and get some deep vision down and keep better track of Mike Young.
Yeah, now that there's a bit of pressure on the map for Gold Coin United, Santorin is quick to, he's not the Nidalee, but he's the one that's pouncing on the opportunity to get some vision control on that top side of the map in the blue buff area for P1, but also try to bully around Mike Young and steal some camps away from him. The CS advantage is slightly in favor of Santorin, although he has done those Krugs a little bit more, and so you can see the gold difference overall. Mike Young still leading by about 300 over his opponent.
Up on the top side, not super talked about, but
yeah, there's a top lane in there.
Yeah, there is a top lane. It's actually been going pretty well for Solo. It is a matchup that's not too bad for Nari. He does have decent tools for being able to survive the often extremely aggressive laning phase of Renekton. You see him open up with a nice trade on the Zig.
Solo's the one that's getting aggressive this time around. Gets the Gnar against the wallop, and the boulder toss combo.
Yeah, J4 is on the top side of the map, so he's potentially setting up a bit of a dive here, trying to chunk him out early on and keep him harassed down, but you see that sustain that comes in from Call to Meek, able to heal Zig up quite a bit, and it looks like Santorin might just be content with some counter jungling.
But there has been a lane swap that's going on at the exact same time. GCU utilizing their back timing, trying to get Rikara into a safer situation, but they're just giving up so much damage on that tower. Santorin's around the corner, and they're trying to go into a tower trade situation, but their tower's already dead on the bottom side of the map, and that's solo gold for Arrow.
But all things considered, I do think this is a bit of a necessary swap out of GCU. I mean, you can't sit down there and keep taking that CS deficit. P1 could just extend laning phase and let Arrow continue to smash. Already at a 50 CS advantage just through standard laning. I don't hate GCU's decision to get Rikara out of there and hopefully into longer lanes where he's just not pressured while farming, but it is a pretty feels bad concession to make. Yeah,
not only that, but they split the tower gold between Solo and Rikara, trying to get him back into this game. Has picked up a BF sword for himself, but already a completed build water cutlass and a pair of boots on the side for Arrow. So Rikara now gets to go back down into the bottom side of the map and farm away to his heart's content. It's going to be difficult to freeze it because he is Tristana. He does have the explosive charge. Is going to be able to splash damage and naturally pushed away, but this will open up Mad Life to be able to move around the map a little bit more. He's picked up his Sightstone, he has a pair of boots for himself, so now we'll get to see if he and Santorin can kind of regain some of this control that P1 has had in the early game.
It's going to be tough, already down to a 1,500 gold advantage just through laning phase. 10 minutes into the game does not bode well, and it's one of those things that if you're looking at this series overall, you saw how invested GCU was in the draft phase, trying to set Arrow behind, and if this is the result, this could be a potential point of weakness that GCU is not able to overcome.
Fly getting aggressive on Ryu, continue to do so in the mid lane, but there have been some pings going down in the jungle as both junglers and supports are hovering around that mid side of the map, and while P1 has had this early game advantage, there hasn't been a ton of, there's been aggression such as invades and trades in lane. It's actually Ryu gonna get paralyzed and gazed up, teleport already being channeled from both top laners. Zig's there to the party first though. The cleanse coming out from Fly, he tries to flash, but he goes down. First blood over to Mike Young. Solo's gonna wind up getting another kill as Special winds up going down. The Catalysm was used, but now they're gonna wind up flashing forward and locking down onto Solo as he winds up falling down.
Gonna be a 2-for-1 at the end of that. Very close on the side of Fly of being able to get first blood onto Ryu there. He had the corrupting pot ticking, but he was not able to get Ryu down. Lived at 2-1.
Oh, down to 1.
Oh my god, the natural regen of the D shield coming in to kind of negate that tick that was coming out of the corrupting pot. Down to a single health there, and it comes out a 2-for-1 as a result. Nice reactions by Zig. Quick teleport getting involved to try and stop Fly from getting that solo kill. We'll take another look at it though. Hides over the wall, fakes like he's roaming into the river. Ryu walks forward. The teleport's already completed as they're making a play onto him. Ryu lives. Solo just a moment too slow. Does get a nice two-man ult, as well as getting chain CC follow-up by Santorin, but after that they're in full retreat mode as Rikara was not a part of that play, pushing that bot lane in like you were saying, and just a little slowly getting involved. And the gold lead extends a little bit further now, 2,500 almost.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, Mike Young's going to have to be a catalyst on this Nidalee pickup. As you saw as that fight was developing, 100% team first blood participation from Mike Young. P1, when they get first blood, it's because of Mike Young, whether it's a kill or an assist. They don't do anything in the early game without him. It's nice to see that he might not be back to full Rift Rivals form. We can see that Mike Young on this Nidalee pickup is doing what he needs to do to set his team up for success.
Rift Rivals, Mike Young would have missed that spear on red buff.
Like I said, he's not quite back up to full form yet. This is not even his final form. This is just his early game form.
All things considered, though, for P1, this is the ideal start that you were hoping for. Mike Young's able to get a small advantage on Santorin. Early game, their bot lane and Arrow are hard smashing their lane. Ryu's holding on versus Fly, who is kind of the main focal point for GCU. And then Zig's just going even versus Solo in a matchup that is not super influential. The biggest thing that you're concerned about is if Solo gets a couple kills and starts becoming a split push threat, because that is one thing that GCU's comp can do pretty well.
Yeah, one of the things that P1 needs to do now is not to take their foot off of the gas pedal at this point. They've been able to pick up the first blood. They got a fight that went in their favor, and you saw already how GCU basically had to scatter to the winds once the Nara and Jarvan combination was pretty much used up, and the fact that Fly was taken out so early on. But they do end up having still a Cassiopeia and a Tristana. Yeah, the Tristana's been set very, very far behind, but we saw Rikara not opting into that fight and instead trying to get himself back up to a point where you can hit some of these item break points. If P1 is going to keep slowing things down and not kind of push those advantages a little bit further, the late game scales in favor of Goldcoin United. P1, as we mentioned already, their engage tools are pretty much limited to Thresh and Varus.
It's one of those things that you're a little bit surprised to see P1's bot lane return down to that bottom lane. It's something that they'll always have pressure in, but it is a harder turret to work on potentially. That said, with how well Arrow and Xpecial are performing compared to their counterpart, they can just keep setting up here. Mike Young can rotate over, and Nidalee Form has that red buff on as well. That auto attack gonna do a little bit more to that turret. And this is kind of what we were talking about. P1 gets an early game advantage, and then they start sieging around turrets. They're turning their comp online here, and GCU is struggling to keep up.
And we saw a pair of zoning skill shots being thrown at as Rikara just kind of stood still to dodge both of them, but he did wind up losing that inner tower on the bottom side, which will give them a bit of dragon control, which is something that P1 did not necessarily have a lot of in the NA LCS, but because of the vision control that GCU has got throughout the Challenger Series, was one of their strong suits. So P1's going to be taking away one of those additional win conditions, we'll call it that, from Goldcoin United. It's going to be boding extremely well for them as this game now crests into the 15-minute mark. About a 3,000 gold lead for P1. So Mike Young going to continue doing what he does best, get aggressive onto Solo and forces him back.
P1 grouped up around mid a little bit. Solo had the push on the top side. P1 backs off the turret because they feel him kind of coming up there. And Mike Young spots him in the river, hops on him, just some trades, and both teams back away. GCU are eventually going to need to find a big teleport flank of some kind as P1 continues to set up around these turrets. P1, with the fact that they have this huge pressure advantage, they can do a lot of different lane setups. They can keep Ryu mid and just have him hold on versus Fly because the Varus is doing so well compared to the Tristana. You can keep the Varus in the side lane in that situation. Or you can do what they seem to be going for here with Varus going to mid lane, put the Corki in a side lane, and go for more of a 1-3-1 setup.
Yeah, well, that mid lane tower is also taking a little bit of damage from their rotation earlier on when Nidalee was dueling with the Gnar over on the topside river. And Ryu does have the package available on Corki, so he can rotate over at a moment's notice. We see now that already a very early QSS picked up for Arrow as well, so not only just content to the fact that he's gotten this advantage over the Tristana, but making sure that he doesn't wind up giving it away at this point in time, going for that extra kind of cleanse summoner spell he doesn't have taken on his kit right here, but going to make sure he stays healthy against these Morgana Dark Bindings and against the Cassiopeia, knowing that the lane assignment is that he's in mid lane against these two.
It is still a little surprising to see it. It's a very defensive purchase. He is so far ahead of Rikara that he can afford to index into some defense and still keep his damage up for the game. But it does feel like, given the fact that it's only a Morgana Binding or a Cassiopeia Ultimate, two things that oftentimes as an AD carry you're just kind of expected to outplay initially, it does feel like it might be a little too defensive.
And man, you're a Varus. You don't have a lot of mobility, so you gotta
Thresh, man.
Yeah.
Click the lantern.
You can click the lantern.
Turn your back when the Cassiopeia ults you.
Can't click the lantern if the Cassiopeia puts miasma down, however.
And QSS will not help that.
That also won't help that, though. We can see now that Arrow with his gold advantage in the mid lane continuing to push up about 1,600 gold over Rikara's Tristana, who is kind of now just moving into the mid lane to kind of match it. You see the Thresh Lantern being taken there. He did click the lantern, so he's taking himself alive, but Goldcoin United now indexing on trying to keep Arrow down in this mid lane. Now they're sending Zig on the bottom side of the map for P1 and Ryu up to the top side and pinging down that tower.
With that trade there, it indicates to me that that's probably not the right lane setup because Arrow got chunked out so easily, so freely by Fly. As long as someone is kind of in the area that Fly feels safe enough to move up like that, or he has enough vision to say that he can take that 1v2 trade, you can see he's not particularly scared. Whereas when Ryu was in the mid lane, he just matched up even to Fly, wave cleared, and Arrow was able to pressure very aggressively around these turrets. We'll have to see after they grab this Drift Herald here for P1. It does not look like GCU is going to contest this if they go back to that lane setup or not.
Yep, so this Envoy teleports to the bottom side and using Ryu's Corki to push up onto the top side of the map, they secure themselves a Rift Herald. So P1 now has that available, and we'll see if they wind up trying to brute force down this mid lane tower with that, or if they send Ryu back up to the top side to continue split pushing away. They do send Rakara from Goldcoin United onto this top side, trying to give him a little bit of a free farm lane, but now Corki's going to get aggressive. Valkyrie's in forward. They has to use the buster shot from Rakara to force him back, but still, tons of damage being done to Tristan.
I mean, if Ryu can find looks like that in the side lane, then it's absolutely fine for him to be up there. He's going to be able to get some alone time on this turret. Mike Young moving up to potentially help work on it. It's close to full health as Solo had control for most of the lane phase. Santorin moves up as well to try and defend it, but he need a lot of poke.
That's true, and Ryu's already got the completed Trinity Force and Sorcerer Shoes on this Corki, so he's packing a bit of a punch with the missiles. Now Special has joined the fray, so P1, they keep Arrow on the mid lane, they keep Zig on the bottom side, and they're going to be playing around Ryu as their AD carry, but that does leave Fly open, deal some damage to Arrow. Just a quick couple of spells there, and Arrow's already down to half HP.
This is one of the problems when the Special starts roaming out of mid lane, is Arrow has no way to defend himself from the big scary snake in the mid lane, so he's pinned under his turret, gets chunked out. Fly is able to threaten a potential turret dive, and I mean, GCU knows where everyone is on the side of P1 and can play as aggressive as they want when they set up for that siege up on the top side. That said, P1 did get the turret.
And so they get the turret on the top side, and they're going to rotate down towards the mid lane here. Ryu and Mike Young trying to get some poke damage down. They do want to get in a little bit of Mad Life from Fly. The spear does not wind up landing, though. They've been able to take that top lane tower. They've rotated into the mid lane. Of course, Mike Young still has that Rift Herald trinket, the Eye of the Herald, in his inventory. We'll see if they pop that one with everybody pretty much grouped up around mid and try to brute force this down. Ta-da!
Yep, good call. GCU does not have the best wave clear, but they do have the potential to engage. It's going to do a lot of damage to the turret, but they're going to do a little bit more.
So Rift Herald gets one fateful charge, does not knock down the tower, so unfortunately not getting that mid lane tower down. However, it did do a large chunk of damage, and like you mentioned, the siege situations for P1's composition are going to be where they wind up shining. They have to be very careful of Solo and Santorin getting the Narvin combination down into like a counter engage, but they can poke them off this tower, they might be able to take it down, but everybody grouped up here from GCU, they're able to clear that wave pretty fast.
They're able to clear the wave, but P1 did have good vision control, as well as the fact that the Gnar is sitting in the lane helping wave clear. So it felt like a situation where P1 might have been able to walk up a little bit more aggressive to try and finish that turret off, but it seems like they were happy with the damage from the Rift Herald. They know that they'll be able to grab it eventually, and instead go for a reset there as Ryu grabs the second pack of the game, uses it mid lane.
Getting aggressive on the Fly. As I say, they can siege with this one, but instead they're just going to wind up brute forcing Fly out of the lane because of it. That should be enough to knock down that tower.
Hey, land some poke. Fly chunked down to around 25% health, and now no one's left to really be able to walk forward and stop this turret from going down.
There it goes. Fourth tower of the game going down for P1 as all the outer towers are now taken down. Got a Mountain Dragon and an Ocean Dragon on their side as well, so P1, they're playing this one fairly straightforward. I mean, they got advantages on the bottom side of the map despite being targeted down in Champion Select. Arrow getting 4 AD carry bans out of the 5 total bans from GCU in their Champ Select phase. They were able to capitalize on that bottom side and continue to keep about a 40 CS advantage over his counterpart. Mike Young was getting some aggressive counter jungling done early on, but more importantly, secured his team first blood. They got Rift Herald. They got itself about a 5,000 gold lead. Things looking pretty good for P1.
We'll just have to see how they transition that to the Baron, because eventually they'll probably want to take that one down. Their team comp is not particularly tanky with that Nidalee pick, and that's one of the areas a Nidalee comp can struggle at, is that when you are ahead, you don't have someone who can tank that Baron damage. You get chunked down low. Nidalee does have sustain with her heal to keep herself a little bit healthy, but it's still scary that if a Jarvan and a Gnar come flying into the pit with you and start CCing you up, that Baron's going to do a lot of damage to you. And that is the concern, because Renekton's probably going to be up on the top side or something, dealing with the Gnar, trying to keep him pressured in. So that's the big question. How will P1 transition the Baron, if they even choose to? I mean, there are still 2 inner turrets left on the top and mid side they can potentially look at as their next objectives.
Yeah, anecdotally, P1's kind of Achilles heel this split has been that Baron play. They've had leads against some of the top teams in the league, like TSM, like C9, but they've struggled around those Baron pit fights and areas, and just not even the fact that they have a hard time committing to finishing the Baron or finishing the fight, just the fact that they don't necessarily have the control around the pit, and they get these steals away from them that completely turn the game around when they have leads like this. So Goldcoin United, as you mentioned, having the ability to jump into the pit and having the CC to turn that around could be a devastating thing for the side of P1. They still have a lot of other things on the map they could go for, like the second Mountain Dragon of the game, which will definitely help them take down those remaining 2 outer towers.
Oh yeah, 10% bonus true damage to this turret. Ryu instantly puts it to work, starts mowing down on this one. GCU have a hard time kind of contesting. Up on the top side, people were working on vision control around that Baron, but P1 was down at Dragon, and now they're grouped up mid, going to take this inner turret as well.
Yeah, so Gold United kind of caught on the opposite side of the map. They wound up losing a tower because of it. Zig taking a bit of a precarious position, tries to slice through a wall. That one's a little bit too thick to dice through. But P1 are just going to be able to back away from this one. There hasn't been a lot of kills in this game, but there's definitely been a lot of objectives, mostly in favor of P1. 3 dragons, 5 towers, and a lot of...
And this was one of the things that people criticized GCU over, was that they tend to play a little slow, and they want to grind you out. And P1 may not have found all the kills that they were looking for in the early game because they want to skirmish so aggressively, but they still found the pressure at the right times and in the right places. Xpecial was able to get out a laning phase and help Mike Young steal away Gromps and things like that from Santorin to give him a lead. At 20 minutes in, he had about a 1.4k gold lead for Mike Young, and Arrow was at 1.9. So those two factors for P1, the aggressive Nidalee pick and Arrow absorbing all those bans and still coming out with a lead, have grown all the way now to a 6,000 gold lead.
And keeping Mad Life in lane was a huge factor, and you saw, just taking a look at the mini-map, there's a ton of blue vision down in the blue buff area for the side of Gold Coin United. So Mad Life and Santorin haven't had the same kind of controlled vision play style that they usually had in the Challenger Series. But nowadays, or right now at this point in time, they're not being able to commit to these engagements. They're being a little bit too cautious because, as you mentioned, they play slow, they play controlled, they like having secured area before they engage on their own terms. They just haven't had that security this game so far.
And it's one of the things that you might not ever find in a game like this, assuming P1 does their job of controlling vision and all these things. You'll have to take a scrappy fight and look to outplay. You're not always guaranteed to find the perfect teleport flank ward for solo when you're on the back foot. And that's one of the things that they've always struggled with, was the more scrappy game plans, the ones where it's just going to get bloody early on. That's how in the finals, E United were able to steal a couple games away, was from a more aggressive early games. And here you see, once again, GCU struggling with that. Solo trying his hardest to split push down onto the Renekton.
Yeah, but Dominus being popped immediately.
Yeah, they have the Corki coming in as well to bring up some backup. But here you see why Solo and this Gnar pick is such a menace in the side lane, so hard to keep locked down.
Yeah, we had a good dice over the wall there from Zig to try to cut off the escape of Solo, but just kind of used him as a bit of a little launch pad to hop himself even further away.
It's one of those things where against most champions, you're like, haha, I predicted where you were going to go, but for Gnar is like, great, thank you for the extra 500 range on the jump away from the Corki.
So Gold Coin United, Solo on the bottom side of the map, keeps himself nice, healthy, and alive. Now we see that P1 are transitioning a bit of that vision control up towards the Baron Pit area, but Gold Coin United are here in the area and ready to try to contest that. As you mentioned, Mark, Gold Coin United may have to wind up buying into some of these scrappier engagements, which seemingly are P1's strong suit, but if it's a scrappy engagement around the Baron Pit area and you have the better team fight comp, GCU might be able to come out ahead, but P1 are going to put them to the test. Double Mountain Drake shredding through Baron immediately, and that just goes down before GCU's anywhere close.
Woo! You talk about fast Barons. That was so quick out of P1 there, and the Double Mountain, like you said, as well as the fact we were talking about Nidalee as a jungler, doesn't tank it as well. She does do a ton of damage to Baron, so if you're able to find an isolated situation where you're not needing to worry about the engage, you can just go full aggro on it, and Nidalee does a ton of damage, as well as the double marksman composition for P1 here. Grab himself a free Baron 26 minutes in.
Well, P1's avoided one of the pitfalls of their NA LCS split so far, which has been giving away Baron or losing a fight in the Baron pit. So they have secured themselves the Baron, but now the big question is going to be, how do they utilize this? What do they get off this Baron power play? Is it going to be kind of like those one-and-done Baron pushes, or is it going to wind up being something that they use to break into the base, take an inhibitor, and fall back? Or are they going to get a little too overconfident now and try to dive through some of these towers and give away their advantage? I
would hope not to see a dive out of this comp. It's, like we said, one of the ones that's going to want to do exactly what they're doing right now. Set up in front of a turret, hit it a couple times, it'll drop, and you have Thresh who can sit back with a lantern to try and save someone if it looks like the enemy team is posturing for an engage, or the Thresh can walk up aggressively as well, look for hooks into the turret, and then chunk people out with a Nidalee, Corki, and Varus poke.
Well, P1, the game may not have gone exactly how we thought it was going to go because there have not been a ton of kills and there haven't been a lot of fights in general. Instead, it's kind of Gold Coin United just kind of slowly bleeding out objectives and slowly losing control of the map and kind of being pushed back into their own side of the base. Now, almost 28 minutes in, it's going to be another Ocean Dragon spawning in just a couple of, about a minute or so. And this is going to just be P1 getting complete dominance of the map. They're pushing up every single wave. The top lane reset a little bit because they just wanted taking that tower, but will start pushing back in their favor in just a couple of seconds. Zig was already on the bottom side of the map pushing up that wave. Now just going to rotate to mid and just take pot shots at this tower. Eventually, GCU is going to have to try to do something or they'll just lose the game without fighting whatsoever.
You see a triple buffed up Corki, big one, rocket, chunk out the entire backline at GCU there. Ryu's starting to hurt a lot, as well as the fact that GCU have not had much time to build up their tank stats. That's one of the things that their comp should have is better survivability when they go for an engage or something like that, but they've, one, never found an opportunity to, and two, the lead that P1 got is so large so quickly that they don't have the tools to negate that damage.
I wouldn't be surprised if Ryu and Arrow combined have more damage than Goldcoin United's entire team at this point in the game, just because of how pokey and how effective they are at this kind of siege style of play with this team composition. They've already broken down the bottom side inhibitor tower. They're poking down on the inhibitor. They still wind up having Zig in the mid lane, who's taking pot shots at that tower, and Goldcoin United just can't, well, they land one Dark Binding, but they can't land CC. They don't feel confident going in whatsoever, and they're just giving up their base at this point. They try to catch on to Zig here. Solo looks like he might have just finally had enough. Almost has the Gnar bar maxed out here. Peyton for flash forward for Santorin, and the Gnar is there. The Cataclysm has not been used yet, and it will follow up. Finally, GCU pulled the trigger, and they get a kill onto Arrow. Now Ricard has jumped into the fray, and he's picked up a kill onto X-Special. Ryu will be able to answer the kill onto the Tristana, but now they've blocked him up, and he's going to wind up going down. It's Mike Young and Zig against the world as they're actually forcing back GCU. Zani's Hourglass popped by Nidalee, and now GCU has to turn tail and run despite coming out ahead 3-2.
A great fight out of GCU. They find the perfect engage onto Arrow, but where was this 15 minutes ago? It's now 30 minutes in. P1 has 8 turrets to 1, a 10K gold lead still, so even though GCU does a good job repelling P1 at their gates, they needed to pull that trigger way earlier when they were actually fighting over neutral objectives.
So a 10K gold advantage is GCU winning a fight 3-2, despite being 10K gold behind. But like you mentioned before, where are these engages before? Where was the kind of flashing forward out of this, Bash Brothers combo of the Gnar and the Jarvan?
It's something that when you look at how that fight started, it's not particularly impressive. It's not like Sola had a monster flank that was perfectly timed with his Gnar bar. He was sitting at half health. They threw a black shield on him. He ran forward and auto attacked until he finally hit Mega, and then there was a flash follow-up from a Jarvan. It's a play that you ostensibly could have made at any point in the game if you just grouped the Gnar and built a meter up. And it's the kind of thing where, yes, there's not a specific instance in the game that I can recall where I'm like, I can't believe GCU didn't pull the trigger there. But there weren't also many instances like that where they just grouped up and even looked for a fight.
Yeah, we see about a 4,268 gold Baron power play for P1. So they utilized that one quite effectively. They got themselves an inhibitor on the bottom side. They got themselves an inhibitor tower. They got the outer tower on the top side of the map. So very effective usage of that Baron buff. They lost the fight at the end of everything, but they still wound up coming out with a 10,000 gold advantage over Goldcoin United. Now they have the pressure on the map. The bottom side is going to have to be answered by Goldcoin United eventually, and Solo's already all the way down there. So the next Baron that spawns in a little less than 2 minutes could just be the one that P1 needs to end the game.
In P1's shoes, though, I would like to see them continue to play aggressive here. The bot inhibitor, like you said, already down. You have a mid lane inhibitor exposed. You can try and group up, just be a little bit more respectful of GCU's potential engage there, as Arrow was very far forward in that situation. Be a little safer around it as you push into that mid inhibitor, and you can leave someone up on the top side to potentially look to take that top inhibitor turret by themselves.
Yeah, we see already Ryu rotating up there with the package. Is going to be Corki on the top side of the map, while Zig is now grouping up be the front line for the rest of P1 as they try to bash down onto this exposed inhibitor in the mid lane. Good black shield prevents the chain of corruption from locking down Ricard. He's able to just rocket jump himself out of there. So that's already one of the engaged tools that P1 has, the limited amount of engaged tools they have already down. It looks like that would be the go signal here. Santorin's going to jump into the side as Ryu hasn't joined the fight out quite yet. They hook on to Mad Life, but now Solo goes in against the wall. The QSS is popped from Arrow. Paralyzing Gauge doesn't really lock down onto anybody, as now Solo's going to be forced out of the fray. GCU tried to pull the trigger at that point, but P1 was ready for it.
Almost able to find another opportunity onto Arrow, but this time the defensive tools come up clutch. Special's able to launch him away with the first engage, able to QSS out of the second one. Ricard hopped a little bit too far forward, had to flank around the right side as GCU no longer has any engage tools to try and stop that inhibitor from going down. Fly just shoots his petrifying gaze out there, hoping to catch somebody, but not able to.
Ultimate. doesn't wind up landing, as that Gold United have lost a mid lane inhibitor as well, because the only objectives left on the map are the ones protecting their Nexus and the ones on the top side. Baron's going to be spawning about 10 seconds. P1 are trying to force them into a fight around this Baron pit area, because otherwise they'll just wind up going for it. Solo, though, almost transforming into Mega Gnar. Does not quite have his ultimate available, though, when he does transform. So this could be a little bit dangerous for GCU if they just kind of walk in blind, but P1 waiting on the side of their blue buff area, trying to lay a trap, but GCU are content to put a couple of wards down.
And GCU needs to be careful just because Zig still has his teleport available, and the fact that P1 has been pushed up for so long, he could even do a tricky just teleport over the wall behind them play. Instead, looks like they're going to focus down to this Baron.
Ooh, it's already down to about 5,000 HP, and the teleport has now come out from Solo, and P1 are just like, all right, we got what we wanted. The teleport play is not there. Now you can't defend against these two waves of super minions. Just teleport in. Solo, though, is a little bit tired here. He does want to jump down onto Ryu, but he's not yet been able to build up that Gnar bar. Now GCU, kind of like a do-or-die situation, dancing around this Baron. They decide to try to start this one back up. They're losing Nexus towers while this happens. P1 is going to keep them occupied. They lock down onto Arrow, and they're able to pick up a kill. The Gnar back against the Cataclysm, but Gnar winds up going down. Paralyzing Engages come back up, and GCU are winning this fight. P1 have lost 3 of their main members, but they still have the super minions in the base. Gold United are going to try to get themselves this Baron, but Xpecial and Zig are in the area. They flash down and they hook down onto Santorin, trying to prevent the smite from coming through. They're DPSing down onto Zig and will pick up a kill. Rakara gets the credit for that one.
Oh no, just like we've been saying this whole time, P1 struggles around the Baron buff. They do the right play, they started off, they bait the teleport, they have the super creeps down in their base working for them, but Zig goes for a wraparound flank on Renekton, and GCU just runs it right up the middle with no front line available to protect this very squishy core of P1 anymore. They're able to find engage onto Arrow again. So there you see Zig wrapping all the way around, and once again, this just starts with Arrow too far forward and Solo building Gnar bar as he just auto-attacks with Arrow. Eventually, though he does die, he does find a couple people to knock closer into his team, and the follow-up is there. GCU is able to blow up the jungle, AD carry, and mid laner all at the same time.
And this is what we were talking about. Now that we kind of hit the 35-minute mark, Rakara's been able to get himself into pretty much late-game Tristana build. He's got, you know, the full Energizer, rapid-fire cannon, static ship, Infinity Edge on par. He's also got a Lord Dominic's Regard to rip through what little front line that P1 actually has. And the Cassiopeia at this point, fully stacked Rod of Ages, Saracen Brace, Morello Namacon, she's at her late-game carry potential as well. So P1's early-game composition, their Poke and Siege composition, not their team fight around Baron composition, are going to have to be all on the same page to try to combat GCU and their stronger later game kind of carry-centric stuff. So when Zig is not there for the front line, we saw how disastrous it can wind up being.
You need some way to stop GCU from just running at you. And other than Xpecial potentially laying the box down, that doesn't necessarily stop a Gnar jumping in or a Jarvan EQ Flash R combo, the way a Renekton can if he's just in the way and stuns him up. And here you see now GCU finally getting some pressure back in their favor, already cutting that gold lead down to 4,500.
Yeah, and that's just by taking their second tower of the game. So through these kills, through these CS advantages, able to build up on people like Solo here, and now gotten Rakara back into the lead where he's flipped the advantages. Arrow had the 40 to 50 CS lead. Now Rakara has the 30 CS later game lead here on the Tristana. So closing the gap to less than 5,000 gold, and only 2 towers have been taken by GCU.
Yeah, a lot of catch-up gold available for the challenger squad here. P1 are trying to stabilize. They don't want to give up any more neutral objectives. You see both teams kind of hovering around this Elder Dragon. GCU has no dragons for themselves, so they wouldn't get that much of a burn from it. But obviously, if you're able to keep that off P1, that's a huge benefit as well.
Oh, yeah.
GCU needs to find some way to continue to slow the game down. You want your inhibitors to respawn. You don't want to end up in a 50-50 smite situation at this Elder Dragon, because if P1 wins that, you probably lose the fight. And they just want to continue to play slow and look for another opportunity here to find a good engage. And as we've seen in 2 of the fights that they've won, they haven't been the cleanest engages in the world. I mean, Solo died as he did that, as he just traded auto attacks with Arrow in order to build his Gnar bar, trading his health for engage opportunity, essentially.
Well, one of the things we were talking about GCU in the early game was the fact that sometimes they play a little slow. So if they need to slow the game down and wait for inhibitors to respawn, they're the kind of team that do it. But they're going to want to catching down the Solo here. He's kind of wrapped around the outside, tries to leap away, but he gets flayed out of it. Has to burn the flash. He burned his Gnar ultimate as well. So P1 getting a very crucial pick here in this Dragon Dance. And more importantly, wasting the Baron buff of GCU.
Even though they're still in the gold lead, I don't hate the idea of P1 just forcing this Elder Dragon down and going for a 50-50 smite.
Well, they want to take it as Mike Young smites that one away, and now the Elder Dragon burn is there for a 5 stack. So any of this poke is going to hit like a truck, and GCU just have to run the heck away.
Great decision-making out of P1 there. They find Solo off on the flank by himself, chunk him out so one of the 2 frontline members cannot walk forward to contest that Elder Dragon. You still have 2 Mountain Dragons and a very high DPS comp, so you can force it down very quickly. Santorin not able to get that smite off, and now, even though, like I said, they had the gold lead, they were on the back foot at that point in the game, but this gives them control once again.
And as you mentioned already, Elder Dragon plus 4 Elemental Dragons. So they're going to rip through objectives with this, the Mountain Drakes. They're going to sustain themselves up with these Ocean Drakes. Look at the burn damage coming in.
Yeah, Rikara dropped almost half health just with a single big one and then the burn after. Fly also getting chunked out extremely hard. You see how difficult it is for GCU to walk up because any stray damage that lands now has that huge extra true damage.
And we see already the inhibitor going down. Meanwhile, though, the minions doing the work for Gold Coin United, getting themselves a 4th tower on the top side of the map. Their Baron power play was above average at best. Although this is kind of more of a catch-up Baron, which you normally don't wind up seeing being a very, very huge thing. You usually wind up being, we're going to stall for our inhibitors to come back up. We're going to try to wind up, mitigating the damage as possible. I think they wind up losing their inhibitor, but they got themselves back in the game gold-wise and have completed a bunch of crucial items. And more importantly now, have weathered the frontal assault of this Elder Dragon burn, which will only be there for about a couple more seconds.
Elder Dragon already passed 50%. It's going to take a little bit of time, like you said, to push up to the next turret. They might not be able to get another empowered one off. And then, as they're the only ones with an inhibitor down in their favor, P1 will probably still be in the driver's seat for that Baron that's going to respawn in 2 minutes.
You got to be careful, though. Last time you were in the driver's seat for the Baron play, you wind up trying to chunk somebody out, and you lost. Yeah, you crashed. So you got to
have a great course.
You got to be very careful about your navigation around this Baron pit area, as this game that looked like it was going to be over around the 27-minute mark has now extended itself to almost the 40-minute mark right here. And as we mentioned, this is Gold Coin United's kind of territory. They like playing these longer games. They like being the ones that kind of slow things down and stay in control. And they like being the ones that, with their superior team fight composition, they get to the point in the game where one fight and done.
Any engage onto an important backline member of P1 could instantly win GCU the game from here. It's just about being able to find it. I mean, we know GCU's 2 scaling champions of Tristana and Cassiopeia will be able to do tons of damage late game. Corki, no slouch either. Varus will slightly get overtaken, and then GCU have all the tankiness in their favor with the Gnar and Jarvan, but...
Ryu's on a ward. He doesn't necessarily know it, but Solo does. So he doesn't want to go any further forward here as the rest of P1 kind of grouping up to steal away this blue buff away from Gold Coin United. So GCU, what vision control that they've been able to establish on the map so far, keeping their split-pushing Gnar threat alive.
Many objectives.
The small victories potentially could add up to a big one here.
The 40-minute blue buff steal.
Ooh, the 40-minute red buff secure on Tristana. It's actually kind of important.
That is a little bit more useful, I will grant you. If Tristana is able to continue to kite out targets, has the longest range of any of these auto attackers in the game right now, is pretty useful.
And we can see, though, that P1 are trying to look for the engage over the wall. Want to try to get something done while Solo is not ready and available in the fight. Narbar is going to turn minion just a little bit. It's Ryu, actually, is the one that gets a large amount of poke there. Just one auto attack crit from Rikara, but he's got Mike Young to heal himself up and get himself nice and healthy. It's how GCU trying to push up the mid lane. The P1 has some vision control around the Baron pit area. They wind up securing themselves a Scuttle Crab as well, but now Solo has rejoined the fray, and this, this looks familiar. P1, they want to back away from this.
P1 has to be very careful about a straight up 5v5 in the river over Baron. It's not a situation that their comp is going to thrive in. They want to land some of this poke. Rikara and Fly have means to sustain themselves and back up with the lifesteal in Cassiopeia's abilities, but if you land some poke onto frontline members, make it harder to walk forward, you could end up in an advantageous situation. Instead, they're going to reset as Solo works his way up to the top side to deal with the wave that was building up there.
Yep, GCU's minions took down that inhibitor tower on the top side, but gave P1's minions a large amount of time to stack themselves up. As out, P1 starting off on the Baron. They're going to want to blow in the teleport from Solo. They secure the Baron this time around, actually locked down onto Santorin before Solo's even in the fight. So that's already one down, but P1 now dropping down fairly low. Mike Young has to try to get out of there. Fly's going to pop the Saracen Embrace and live as Rikara winds up taking down Mike Young out of the Zanyas. Now Ziggs rooted up and taking down a double kill for Tristana. Rikara winds up going over the wall. but he's on the opposite side now trying to cut off the escape from P1 here. Arrow's going to be able to recall, but Xpecial and Ryu might be left out to dry. Ryu's going to get tagged by the boomerang, but Solo going to take a chunk of damage, barely going to survive. The GA's been popped. Xpecial's not going to land the hook down on the fly. Ryu's going to respawn, take a lantern to his death. P1 get the Baron, but they lose 4.
And Fly stays alive. Huge play out of GCU there. P1 go for the Baron Force. They're able to get it, but then they take the fight after. They chunk out Santorin right away and kill him, so they think, okay, great, 4v5, but their comp is still worse, arguably, in that situation. And you get to see how strong Rakara is in these late game fights now, able to just stay up back and constantly pelt different targets. So Santorin drops right away, Solo teleports in, but instead of prioritizing getting out, they continue to fight. There's some CC that lands, locks people down. Nice stun out of Fly there to keep them engaged in this fight. And this whole time, Rakara is basically free hitting onto whoever is closest to him. Gets the kill onto Zig, and Mike Young kind of wraps around to make sure no one can kite out this side. Arrow gets the recall off, and then Ryu almost gets out. The boomerang did miss on the way out, but just on the way back, clips him, stops that recall, and secures the next 2 kills for GCU.
And now, a lone Baron buff on Arrow is all that P1 has for that. So Gold Coin United may be on the Baron power kill here as they are continuing to push down on this mid lane. Rakara now 6-1-5 has a Bloodthirster as one of his last items in the inventory. Sold his boots as well, so now he's also got a Runon's Hurricane, so he's got all the Zeal items in the game pretty much picked up for himself. No Phantom Dancer, however, so a little bit sad for that. But Gold Coin United now, we talked about Rakara as well. He was very heavily punished in the laning phase by Arrow and Xpecial. He was the freshest face on a team basically full of veterans for Gold Coin United, and in this late game here, he's the one who's putting on his carry pants for GCU.
I mean, what we said kind of in the start of the day was that, you know, he has some nerves sometimes, it feels like, but he is great on hyper carries, and over the course of the game, despite how atrociously it started for his bot lane, he seems to have calmed down. His champion has hit its power spikes. The game has stalled out to the point where he's in his comfort zone, and GCU's comp enables him to kind of just run wild in team fights, as well as the fact that P1 has no good lockdown CC either. So it feels like not only is his champion spiking, but Rakara himself finding a comfort zone.
Yeah, and now despite him being 50 CS down in the early game, he's basically Flame Horizon Arrow at this point. 100 CS up in the late game, so let's see who gets the last laugh at these CS advantages.
To be fair, not all Flame Horizons are created equal. There's a difference between, oh, my team was losing the game for 30 minutes and I was a wave clearing under my inhibitors. You know, it's not quite the same as I destroyed you in lane.
I mean, from P1's perspective, he could have tried to end this game off of that 27-minute Baron push.
They absolutely should have. Yeah,
20 minutes have passed since then.
They absolutely should have, and so I'm not discrediting Rakara's CS and saying it doesn't count, just that P1 had the opportunity to win this game when Arrow had that CS lead and all that stuff, and their blunders around Baron is what has caused them to be on the back foot now and in a position where it's very difficult to win this game from here.
Yeah, P1 are now the ones that are pretty much huddled into their own base, and as you mentioned already, their early game pressure was working out for them extremely well, but they weren't able to capitalize on that and turn that into a victory. Now that Gold Coin United's later game carries have scaled up, we've been praising Rakara at this point in time, but Fly as well. 1-1 and Ace doesn't have the same amount of kills as Tristana does, but definitely putting down his own carry pants. We saw in that Baron pit fight, he got the paralyzing gaze off, he flashed out with the Saracen Brave Shield, putting him at barely any HP. He's able to stay alive, and as you can see already, the Baron power kill from GCU was strong here, making the goal gap close by about 2.3k, just off the fact that Arrow was the only one with that Baron buff left.
I wouldn't mind seeing GCU continue to be a little bit more aggressive. Elder Dragon is coming up in a minute and a half, and you might end up in another situation like last time where P1 was able to steal that one away by chunking somebody out or just burning it down. They have opportunities to get another Elder Dragon, and that will give them a power spike in this game where, once again, they may be the stronger team. So I wouldn't have minded seeing, during this downtime of no neutral objectives, GCU just take their stronger team comp, run up to that top side where there's no inhibitor turret, and take the inhibitor down there. That would have set up perfectly for the Elder Dragon that's coming up for a minute. And it looks like GCU's natural timidness might have hurt them there, because if you walk up to an inhibitor, what is P1's comp really going to do? A teleport Renekton flank? They're going to shoot some projectiles at you. As long as you don't get chunked out and chased all the way down that lane, you are relatively safe at walking up at a turretless objective.
Yeah, you got a late game Tristana with his Runon's Hurricane now picked up that's going to be able to just sit there and wave clear for days. So taking the safer approach by making sure all the outer towers are down first, as you mentioned, may wind up costing GCU if the Elder Dragon contest turns into a fight that P1 thinks that they can win, or smite away the Elder Dragon and suddenly have that extra damage that will just melt through Gold Coin United into a team fight. We'll see if that happens, though. 10 seconds now that Elder Dragon is going to be up. GCU have been able to establish decent vision control in the opposing red buff side of the jungle, so they'll know exactly the angle that P1 is trying to approach them from. So with the superior teamfight composition, at least they have the positioning advantages.
Yes, they will, at this point in the game, pretty much always have that, just with the ability to have a frontline member run forward, charge into the fray first, and block these skill shots coming in so that they can get vision control afterwards. The question is, will you be able to lock this Nidalee down to stop a potential Elder Dragon steal? And then if she does get it, are you still in a position to win the fight afterwards? Those are the questions GCU has to be worried about right now.
Well, looks like they cleared a couple of wards and decided to start up on the Elder Dragon now. So we have Solo across the backside. His Narbar a little less than half full, though.
P1 going to walk forward for P1.
Yeah, we'll see. Mike Young lands a spear, so the increased pounce range, but the Miazo's keeping him grounded, so he's not going to be able to go through that one. Elder Dragon does go over to GCU. It's not super impressive because it's the only dragon they've got in this entire game, but more importantly, denies it from P1 and forces them away from a Baron now that's going to be spawning in about 40 seconds.
GCU going for all the neutral objectives here. They get the Elder Dragon. Baron's going to be up in 30 seconds. They do have some waves pushing away from them, but it looks like they're just going to go for a flank instead. Solo charging forward once again. His patented engage at this point.
Aha! Run at you. My favorite kind of engage in League of Legends. Who needs gap closers and fancy schmancy jumps? Well, I guess he technically has a fancy schmancy jump, but
it's not that fancy. Just jump forward.
Ooh, we might be in a base race situation here. P1 says, hey, you can take the Baron. We're just going to run straight towards these inhibitors. They're taking down the bottom inhibitor, lickety split, and now the mid one is potentially under threat. Jarvan's still kind of caught in the mid lane area, and Flies run all the way back. Now Goldcoin United have kind of just recalled into their own base. Santorin looking for a flank here. Flash away there from Xpecial, keep him alive. The box is laid down. Santorin's in the back line now. He's locked down onto Ryu. He's going to want to use the Cataclysm, but they've only locked down into Xpecial, and he's going to be the first to die. Fly picks up that kill. Flash finding lands onto Ryu, but he's able to Valkyrie out. The poke damage is there as Goldcoin United's health bars are dropping. Solo is going to transform. There's nothing, though, as the two carries flash away, but P1's a bit split up now. Goldcoin United are going to have to fall back because of the poke damage. They picked up one. That's about it.
And that top wave that they never dealt with has now pushed into their top inhibitor turret. Looks like that one is getting very low as well. Going to drop here to minions most likely. And that's a smart play out of P1, it would seem, rotating down to that bot side while GCU's focused around the Baron. But it almost resulted in the game throw out of them. They got extremely low. The engage failed, but it opened up the Baron for them to secure away as well.
P1 have been able to get that Baron buff down for themselves, but you mentioned something about game throw, and Rakar is trying to make this one the one that P1 throws away. Arrow goes down as Rakar is dominating.
Oh, this is one of those situations where P1 keeps forcing such risky plays and getting away with it by the skin of their teeth. Pinning themselves up in that bottom lane could have been disastrous. A great engage out of Santorin, blocked down multiple members, but Solo was just a little too slow to get involved in that in terms of building up his Narbar and then actually securing it onto the backline members. I believe he had his flash available there and went for the less guaranteed ult instead of going for a flash ult. The members were able to get out alive, and then they go and take the Baron away as well. GCU still on a bit of a power play, though, with Arrow down.
Yeah, Arrow's dead for 35 seconds. GCU look like they might just be trying to win the game right here. A big damage threat from P1 is unavailable, and Goldcoin United have a 5v4 situation. So Zig's going to slice and dice his way in. Solo, the Narbar is ticking up, though. He's going to be ready to transform in just a couple of seconds, but Rakar's already kind of on the front side. Mike Young trying to go for a bit of a flank. Ryu's actually in the back, in the base. He's going for the Nexus. This has turned into a base. I didn't even see Ryu going down. Somehow, some way, P1 will win game one.
P1 steal victory from the jaws of defeat. I didn't even realize Ryu had snuck down to that bot lane with the open inhibitor already taken from the previous play. He catches GCU trying to just brute force around mid lane with the one-man advantage, but they don't realize it's a two-man advantage as Ryu's actually in their base.
P1 doesn't even look like they realized they won that game, and Goldcoin United are just stunned because they were seconds away from winning that game, just moments away from having that game be theirs, but it just gets stolen away from them after surviving for 30 extra minutes. When P1 had that first bear move, we thought it was pretty much GG. Goldcoin United held on, scaled up, had their late game, but like you mentioned, their overcautiousness, they're stalling out, they're waiting for the perfect engages. It costs them when you come up against like P1 that just takes what they can get.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, P1's very, very scrappy in their style, and you saw it there. I mean, they felt like they were on the back foot, so they go for an all-in around the bottom inhibitor. It's a very risky play, but it paid off. And then they go for an all-in around the dragon. Baron. Arrow dies, but they're able to get that. And that kind of flusters GCU to the point where we're saying, while P1's playing the scrappy style, it's very hard for teams that like to play controlled to keep track of everything that's going on. And one of the things they lost track of was Ryu.
Yeah, I mean, we lost track of Ryu.
Yeah, everyone lost track.
Everybody lost track of where he was going.
There.
I mean, I don't know if he picked up a package, just went over the walls or what, but you're in a situation where GCU basically had a 5v4 situation. They were brute forcing down the mid lane. They didn't have the Baron buff on them, but they didn't necessarily need it. As they were just I'm just still like complete shock at the fact that how close that game was to being GCU game 1 victory.
Absolutely. And if you go back over the course of this game, because there are a million of mistakes out of both teams where, you know, P1's first or second Baron attempt where they end up having Zig try and flank instead of just stalling out. There's a lot of different things you can look at. But the big thing for me was what happened in the bot lane very early on in the game, because what you're doing in a best-of-5 series is you're trying to look at what's repeatable, what's something that's going to happen between game 1 and game 2. And the comps won't necessarily be the same. The matchups won't be the same. You won't end up in these crazy situations. But is Arrow's domination of Rikara in the bot lane going to be one of the key features of this matchup?
I mean, we already saw how Goldcoin United was afraid of Arrow banning away multiple AD carries, although it could potentially swap out, as you mentioned. Best of 5 gives us a lot of kind of their own like mini meta of like, all right, you're banning away all these AD carries. If we take an AD carry early, who do you focus on in the ban phase after that? But as you mentioned, P1 had a very clear early game plan despite being targeted down from Arrow.
Right, and I think you can see as GCU moves to the blue side, very easily they can ban away the Nidalee, but with how many bans you put down on the bot side, what does it take to get Rikara out of laning phase even?
Yeah, well, we're a bit flabbergasted with that one, so for more on that P1 win, let's check in with Degon and the analysts.
Thank you very much, Tom. And guys, what a finish there. It looked like Goldcoin had it, and then all of a sudden, it was very opposite of winning till you're losing. It was
Goldcoin, and nope, it's actually Phoenix1. Ryu's been here before.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at that replay real quick, because you can't not talk about this game without looking at how close it was.
Yeah, well, it's so dangerous because it's a 5v3 hold, and I think if Goldcoin would have realized that Ryu was backdooring, they would have dove harder. But as soon as they lose their minion wave, they're in trouble.
I love how this also highlights how good Baron buff is at not only sieging, but also defending. The Baroned up minions take way longer, and so they're also, the 4-man squads just trying to poke around and take away the rest of you know, their minions, and they're able to buy enough time for Ryu to slip through and kills the tower just before the teleport, and it just hilarious.
It's a gut-wrenching loss for Goldcoin United. 15 kills to 6, and it's whenever you're doing one of those long comeback games, you need to convert, otherwise you just become exhausted for game 2.
And it's actually, you know, do you see the reactions of the Phoenix1 players after the win too? They were not happy about it, right? You talk about the mentality of these two teams coming in. You know, Phoenix1 are coming in thinking we're just going to crush this. It's not even going to be close.
Right.
And that was very close. You know, they got outscaled. They made mistakes around Barons, and it very clearly, you know, could have and probably should have been Goldcoins.
And that was a big thing there. That, like, what do you do with this team composition? As you guys can see that on your screen, you get outscaled. How do you figure out what your win conditions are once you've passed that original window?
Yeah, well, that's the tough thing for Phoenix1, right? Because you see Nidalee Renekton is very early game as far as their strategy goes. They're defaulting back to what they're able to win with. But when they're winning with that, they are winning at 30 minutes. So when that doesn't work and the gold lead does equalize, you got to see they look lost, because you then have to find creative ways to win, since you now lose 5v5 team fights, which is why you see Ryu doing random stuff, just running off the side of the map and winning the game.
Win condition, kill the Nexus. Ryu knows what's up, so he goes straight for it.
The veteran knows. But let's go ahead and unpack it a little bit and take a look at one of the replays we have at 29:30. GCU, after a very, very long laning phase, decide to go ahead and pull a fight, but not enough to get anything.
Yeah, and this is because they waited too long. It is one of Goldcoin United's flaws that they kind of wait for the perfect fight, but aren't good at setting up the perfect fight. So by this point, P1 already has a large gold lead and a 3 Drake lead, so yeah, they get a decent amount out of this fight, but they were still down a tremendous amount in the game afterwards.
Well, there's not a lot for them to find as this fight closes out here. So 3 for 2, but you know, Baron going to the side of P1, everything looking like it's going P1's way, but look at this. So after the fight, P1 still is able to get the tower.
Yeah, it's funny though, because this fight was at 29 minutes and they didn't really find a way to return here until 20 minutes later, but that was already an open inhib in the bottom side. They open up the inhib in the mid lane. They take the 4th Drake with the game, and you're thinking it's all but over, but It wasn't. It wasn't all but over.
Nice twist at the end there.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, when you think about throws, you think that it would be the challenger team to do it. The Phoenix1 LCS team, LCS experience, LCK experience with a lot of your players there, especially one of the most veteran supports in the history of the LCS. You figured they would be the ones that pull out the sneaky plays that aren't going to make the fatal mistake. But instead, over there at Baron, they end up getting caught out, and GCU turned this one around.
Yeah, do we have that Baron replay? Let's pull that one up.
Yeah, because it was, both of these teams made what should have been fatal mistakes, and this would have been the one for Phoenix1 trying to fight here at this Baron, and it looked pretty good at this onset of the fight, but Trist Casio is so lethal in 5v5.
Yeah, that's why they kept talking about scaling in this game. Those are so good, long-range, high DPS champions. Once they're able to, get inside the Baron here, Zig with the ultimate on Connected, flashes in, they get the hook, try and get him back in, but a little bit too late. Goes down anyways with the bomb on his head.
It's like they stopped doing damage. Santorin had the Knight's Vow. He was getting healed up by all the damage his AD carry Ricard was doing, so it was ugly for Phoenix1, and that's why after the game, both teams almost looked like they'd lost, because at a certain point in the game, it felt like they should have lost for both of them.
At certain points in the game, it felt like both teams should have won, right? You talk about which team is expected to throw or whatever. This was a
throw fest. They were just
Topsy-turvy.
playing catch with each other, and it ended up that Phoenix1 was going to be the one that ended up taking the win. We're headed for a break, but there's more League of Legends actions coming right back at you when we return. Game 2 of Gold Coin United versus Phoenix1. Don't touch that browser.